please welcome Catie Lazarus.
The theme is Strangers in the Night. So I was going to talk about my first time going to Europe right after grad school. And I should just back up to say that I had never gone on vacation. I started interning when I was 14 years old. My parents, my dad felt my mom was underqualified to be a lawyer because she didn't graduate at the top of her class at Harvard Law. So they had me interning at 14. Very serious kid. There was this reporter, Ann Taylor, on NPR, and I used to think that she also owned the store up the street. That's how I didn't know about chains, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do anything. She owns a store, and she still reports, and I can barely pass pre-cal. And it was a little mess in that area, and then I was a little mess with boys too. Like I had a vicious crush on the lead singer of The Who, Roger Daltrey, and I had just started dating a boy, which meant that we made eye contact at the cafeteria, and I had to break up with the real boyfriend because I felt it was unethical to like two men at the same time. So I was just always like a little off. I grew up in a very waspy area where I did not fit in. And none of the boys, all no inner thighs, men or women. So I thought it was maybe them. Like I didn't have a prom date, even though it was a co-ed school. I tried to farm out to another school, and so I was sure it was just because I was in this waspy area. And then I go to college, and there's Jonah and Judah and Ezra, and they're just like way more Jufros than buzz cuts per square foot. And I was like, I'm going to date the whole Old Testament. It's going to be great. But still no. And then I realized, oh, the problem's not them, it's me. So I was really excited for this trip. I had done a master's in addition to a BA. Still not good enough for mom and dad, but whatever. And I was more than single. And there's that saying about like, don't go to the grocery store if you're starving. I think the same thing should be said, like, do not let young, single American females in Europe. It's just like a recipe for trouble. So I went with my friend Lizzie, and at night she'd just want to go to bed, and I wanted to go out, so I did. And I had nowhere to go. And on the first night, I thought I'd go up to this guy. I was walking down the street and ask him for directions, which is great, except, again, I have nowhere to go. And he suggested his place. I didn't have anything to do. So I went back with this guy, curls, very swarthy, sort of like Algerian French. We were in Provence, and I kind of overestimated my language skills. I learned Spanish from the novellas, so I sort of sounded like when I was crying, but I felt good about it. It's like, when you're drunk and you just, that's how I am in general. You are when you're drunk, that's how I am in life. And same with my French, I really overestimated my skills, so I didn't totally understand what was going on, but enough, and I go with him to this apartment, and I'm sure everyone's had that moment in New York where you just have no idea people live this way. Huge Picassos, there was a grand piano, a chandelier, and we had just met on the street. The only reason we had met is because we made eye contact. It's no different than the person you made eye contact with at the subway today but didn't mean to. I just ended up going back with this one. And he puts on some music, some salsa, and we start dancing. And then he switches it to some very, very slow Mozart, and we're still dancing. And then he starts to undress. And I start to undress, and we're dancing, and I'm waiting for him to make a move, and he never makes a move. Never tries to kiss me or anything. And it was a delightful evening. It was like pure intimacy and totally fun, and I know that's not for most people, but think about where I'm coming from in 8th grade. I still think I need to break up with someone because Roger Daltrey, who's 40 years older, might show up one day. I know it's not the age reason he wouldn't show up, but it was just delightful. And so I went home and didn't tell Lizzie, and kept going with museums with her during the day, and at night I would slip out. And in Italy I met a boy, and this time we did make out in his car, and he didn't want to do any more than that either. And I didn't understand what it was until we went to the Sistine Chapel the next day, and it dawned on me. I was like, oh, Catholicism, they can't bring me home. I don't need to say I'm Jewish. Anyway, so this kept happening. In Ireland, I met a guy, we went on a motorbike, we went on his motorbike, went skinny dipping, got back on the motorbike, and I went home. And it was really, really fun. And unfortunately, our trip was coming to an end, so Lizzie and I were in Italy, we went to this beach in Cinque Terre, and we met some Swedish guy, went topless on the beach, and we met some Swedish guy who was so pale, you know when they're so pale? The only thing dark was the socks or the sandals. But, you know, just like, I think I mentioned to him I was going to Eastern Europe, but that was it. We had spent an afternoon, no dancing, no naked, no nothing. I'm not interested in anyone blonde after high school. I don't care. I go, so Lizzie's parents had gotten a divorce and so had mine, and so she went off with her dad, and I went off to take care of my mom. I grew up in DC, and my parents had a divorce. My dad came out the day Clinton did, because he thought we would be so torn up about what was going on in our country that we wouldn't give a shit about our family. Just a little clue into why I may have had issues about guys. Just a little bit of a rant there. So I decided to take my mom on a trip to her second most favorite activity, which is, of course, visiting Jewish cemeteries. Wonder why that divorce happened. Great way to cheer yourself up. So we were going all through Eastern Europe to look at Jewish cemeteries. And so the sexual adventures tapered off immediately. And I think the only fun I had was like once we couldn't get into one of the cemeteries and the translator was like, I'll go get a key. And I was like, fuck it. I jumped over, went into the cemetery, jumped over the fence. He got so mad, and then I was like, look, I mean, am I gonna walk around with a dead body? This is in Poland, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna be like walking around with a dead body and no one's gonna notice just because that happened a while ago doesn't mean that's gonna happen now. And that did not help the situation. And then the next day we went to visit concentration camps. And the woman who led the tour was a survivor who was poor, and she had to do this to earn a living. And there was a woman on the trip, must have been in her 80s, who was a survivor as well. And we saw the ovens, I mean, it's just horrible and devastating, and particularly so to go with people who have lived through this. And everything started to click, and we go to this museum, click meaning, you know, you just realize how precious life is and how fleeting it is. And we go to this museum area, and there's a board with just mementos, and there was a flyer for a show just like this, and it had bands, and one of the women, one of the survivors, looked at the board, and the cellist was her husband, and she had gone to Dachau to try to rescue him, but was too late, and so all she had was this flyer, and she wanted me to take a photo of her, and she put lipstick on, and we took a photo, and it obviously changed my life, and that was it, you know, this was all she had left. And I went back with my mom to the hotel, and I get back, and I'm sobered up, to say the least. And there are a dozen roses, this weird diorama of a duck, and a note that says, come meet me. And I'm thinking, who left this? Definitely not the translator, I know that. I'd also been kicked out of Slovenia, I'll leave that part out. So I knew it wasn't the immigration officer there. And I asked my mom's other favorite activity besides anything related to the Holocaust is dressing up like Jane Austen characters and going to they're like civil rights war reenactors, but they're like just all repressed older women who get dressed up these dresses, and she is originally from Brooklyn, so it just sounds even crazier. So she'll compare reality. It's the opposite. Like, you know, when you use books and art and literature and music to understand life, she does the reverse. So, like, I was like, who was this? And she's like, it's not something Mr. Darcy would do. Like, she was out to lunch. Like, there's no way I can, like, ask her. So I don't know who this guy is, but we go around the next day. We're in Prague, and I see the Swede. And he comes over smiling, and he's like, isn't this great that I found you? And I was like, shh, it's nice to see you. You know, I don't know this person's name. We were strangers in the night. Even though it was the day. But basically, I don't know who this person is. And I'm like, nice to see you as well. And I go back to my hotel, and again, there's more flowers and there's like a duck. I make arts and crafts projects too, but like these were exceptional. And I'm both flattered that someone's paying attention to me and just absolutely terrified, but I agree to meet him in the lobby, and he shows me the whole phone book that he's taken out, and that he's highlighted all of the hotels, and he's proudly showing me that he just went and called every hotel looking for the Jewish woman and her mother. At this point, I'm just so terrified. And I'm grateful. The next day, we're going to Vienna to the Freud Museum. And I cannot explain what it is like to be at the Freud Museum and see some stalker there. Totally terrifying. There he is. And I just don't respond. Like, I just don't respond. I hadn't been in New York yet, so I didn't know that shutdown mode, but I was learning it. And I moved to New York. And I have lived in 16 years in 19 different apartments, 3 different boroughs. I've also lived in DC and LA. And everywhere I would go, I would get these art projects and phone calls. Now, this was before cell phones and then 2 cell phones. I would get phone calls at every apartment. And the problem is, I can't report someone if I don't know their name. Because I don't know, I mean, like I had a defective stove, and I called the police, and they brought the fireman came over and started laughing. Like, I know I can't, like, it's not easy. So I just kept telling him to leave me alone, and then he would use different aliases on email, as if, like, the handle was the issue. Like, oh, now that you're not at Hotmail, it's totally fine. Glad we cleared that issue up. So he kept following me everywhere. And then finally, I decided to take matters into my own hands, and I had interned once at the State Department, so I got the stationery, and I like wrote a fake serious letter from the State Department telling to leave me alone, that this was enforceable. And I never heard from him again. But I did hear from the State Department, writing me a very terse cease and desist letter. And I've never had a stranger in the night experience since, but I don't regret any of it. And that's it. That's my story.